Welcome to Success Authority's Conversation Street with Leadership Authority Peter Beaumont and with Business Culture Authority Ronn Lehmann and me, Linda Ruhland, Success Authority's founder. Where do you think people start looking for help? Where do they start saying, hey, I don't believe I've got the answers I need to move forward?
I would say there's actually just a step even before that is, am I asking that question? Because I think we've all experienced you'll meet with people and they haven't even considered some of the things that we might say, this is the bedrock and stuff that you need to think about. I'm sure, Peter, that happens with EOS is that, you say, okay, you have the vision and then we work off of that. And they don't have that part. And They don't have a vision of what the vision could be. They just haven't done that. And I guess some look at that and go, okay, well, I have to do that work. And others go, no, I was looking for something a little quicker and easier.
Yeah. Yeah, right. In fact,
cheaper.
And cheaper, yeah.
But most of the time it's you're right, they've never really thought about it. And then another problem becomes, well, we do a 2-day annual and they're like, 2 days? We can't take 2 days,
Yeah.
But to think about the future of the company and get it sorted out. Oh, no. Well, a quarterly is a day as well. And a whole day, so.
Yeah, it's a guy at FedEx referred to that as we're trying to change the tires while we're going down the freeway at 65 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And we can't stop to fix it.
Yeah.
And that analogy, I first experienced.
But if you don't, the wheels are going to come off.
Well, that's it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like preventive maintenance in a way.
Yeah.
But I know when I started in the training business back in the late 1800s, it was, a 2-week training program was not uncommon. We had programs when I was at Wilson Learning, you did 5 days, you stayed for the weekend, there were activities, and then you did another 5 days after that. And nobody blinked at, their people being gone that long. And then it went to, 1 week, and then it was 3 days, and then it was 2 days, and now it's down to, can you do that in an hour?
Yeah.
Or rather than do a day of training, can we do 8 days of 1 hour at a time? Spread out over a year. Like, hey, if you're willing to wait for results, sure. Although they will have forgotten the first hour by the fourth hour. So, but I think that's an indicator of the pressures, the time pressures and answers and things that especially leaders and business owners have to deal with. They can't imagine, going and doing an all-day meeting on stuff that doesn't immediately translate to the bottom line.
Yeah. Apart from which they have to be separated from the digital lifeboats. So,
yeah, so that's a whole nother thing.
Right.
Yeah.
But it is interesting because I think there is much to be said. What you just said is absolutely true. And I think people have equated the fact that now we've got the technology that we've got, that we don't have to spend the amount of time physically training anymore. And of course, nothing could be further than the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of the other big shift in that is that organizations used to spend a lot of money on training people. And now not right now, but a few years ago, it kind of morphed into this, well, we expect you to come trained, and then we'll kind of show you how we do it. But for a salesperson, you need to take sales classes and do all that before you get here, or have experience. Whereas they used to just, especially the insurance companies, industry, used to always they'd hire anybody and we'll train you. A guy I knew sold electric typewriters for IBM, and they did 6 months of training on how to do that before he was ever allowed to talk to a customer to sell a typewriter. And they had to practice their presentations, and they had a big finale where they got up in front of 3 executives and they did their presentation, And if they didn't like it, they started the 6 months over again.
Wow.
It was amazing the amount they put into that, and now kind of got away from that. But now people, they're so desperate for people. I think they're back to hiring people who aren't trained and then just hoping for the best.
Yeah. Yeah, I had 6 weeks training at Cadbury's before they let me loose on poor, unsuspecting customers. I think they wished it had probably been a lot longer.
Well, but there's something to be said for, on the job training, because you can take all the sales classes you want. When you're sitting in front of a customer, that's when you figure out
Yeah.
what
And
doesn't.
some of this was old school too, where we had to, we went through all the classes, and then they'd have this is up in Cadbury's in Bourneville in Birmingham in the UK, and they had this mocked up shop, looked just like the inside of a shop, and then somebody would play the customer behind the counter, and you'd have to sell them.
Yeah.
Boy, did I screw up there a few times.
Well, I think there was always people involved in that who really felt their job was to make your life miserable and be the worst
and
possible
one
customer.
particular guy who did it extremely successfully.
I'm sure he believed he was weeding out the weak souls, but I think all that, as a business owner, all that kind of stuff is, again, there's more sort of evolving rather than conscious choice on how are we going to help people be successful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of it evolves or devolves depending on how that goes. And I think if we're making any argument here, it's there's a lot to think about, but it doesn't have to take years. But if you understand a few or answer a few questions for yourself, then you can do a much better job of evaluating decisions.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, if I know where I want to go, so do I turn here or do I go straight? And I think that's really what we're talking about with the whole book is, here are some real bedrock choice points, and here are some things to consider to help you make those decisions. And they kind of, as I look at the way the book flows, it's really, once you've made that decision, now here's some more things to consider. And it all comes down to, what does finish look like for you? How do you want, where are you going, and how would you like to get there? And here's some things that can help you along that way. But in some ways, that's the easy stuff. The hard stuff is those first questions.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have to take the time to do it. You have to ponder it. And that's a challenge. I mean, like legacy lifestyle, that's a challenging decision. But let me ask you this, Peter, do you think once you've made that decision, are you then locked in forever?
What do you mean by?
So if I say I want to go with legacy, and then
I see what you mean.
3 years later, can you go, well, you know what? Now I want lifestyle, or vice versa? That's true, isn't it? You can always make that choice.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. You're not locked in. I've seen people go from legacy to lifestyle, and from lifestyle to legacy. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So
At what stage, however?
It depends. It depends on the growth of the business.
You're 2 years from wanting to retire. I think that you'd be very much challenged to convert your business into a legacy business if you were lifestyle all along.
Yeah, it depends. Again, it depends. So I've seen a situation, well, maybe not 2 years, but I've seen 5 or so, where suddenly family members have shown interest in the business, and they hadn't up until then. He'd written them off, and they were like, Dad, I'd like to come into the business with you. Shit, changes the whole bloody thing.
It would. Wow.
Yeah. Do you, Peter and Linda,
They failed at their own careers, by the way, but
well, have either of you experienced talking to someone who's at the very beginnings of a business, who either has made that decision, of legacy or lifestyles considered that and then is on that pathway?
I've never seen it at an early stage. No.
Yeah.
I've seen it in terms of what I would define as more of a big dream, but what they were doing versus what their dream was didn't correlate. So it'd be a big picture of pie in the sky, basically. But today, I don't have the resources, or I don't have the people,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know in those cases that they were sustainable ideas.
I wonder if I was a venture capitalist, that would be a really good question for me to ask. If somebody came in with a proposal that wanted funding, I would want to know if they'd thought about that. And I wonder if venture capitalists do that.
They certainly ask the question of scalability.
I've worked with a client, and I've sort of do a little bit of work with them now, but not as much as I did. That was I may have referred to them before. It was a glazing company up in Shawville, and the father wanted to retire. Both his sons were working in the business. They had not realized until I started asking the questions. One of them definitely saw it as a legacy business, and one definitely saw it as a lifestyle business.
And could those two coexist?
Well, that's the problem. That's why I'm no longer working with them.
No. So in your mind, no.
I
hard.
I think I took them as far as I could. Yeah. But they couldn't straighten it out. One wanted to work the hours he wanted to work because he liked working there, and one wanted to work a lot more hours because he wanted to ramp it up and be able to sell it as a at a profit. And the other guy didn't see it that way at all. It was, and I couldn't get them on the same page. So
yeah.
And so I had to get them on the same page to do any of the stuff that I felt they needed to do moving forward. So there was just a disconnect.
Unless the one could figure out or to, see while the other one was building a legacy business, they could have a lifestyle participation in the business.
Absolutely. But he wasn't, the lifestyle guy wasn't prepared to buckle down and work for the guy that wanted to build the legacy business. He saw himself being on a par because he did all the real grunt work, whereas the other guy was just an administrator. And it was just, but I agree with you. If he'd been sensible about it, he could have still done his 9 to 5 and put in the work and drawn his salary while his brother built the business.
Yeah. But if he was the one that was doing the work, that might have come crashing down the road a bit. But, well, you were probably wise to quietly excuse yourself.
Exit stage left.
Yeah. Excuse me. I think my car needs attention.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I go in occasionally to run their quarterlies, but I've even said to the dad, there's not, don't you're paying money for me to do something I can't change. So I think I'm taking money under false pretenses. And his dad goes, okay, let's just play golf then.
There you go. So you can stay connected, but
I went and played golf with him a couple of weeks ago, and
and sometimes things change, but
I'm still in contact with them, and so something. But it's a really good example of how this can get screwed up when confronted with, so what business are you in? The shit hit the fan in terms of having to debate and be realistic about what they both wanted out of the business.
Yeah. But I'm sure there was still value in your posing that question.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, the dad says, you brought us so far, and I think we're actually thinking about this stuff now. Was what we were discussing, we were just going along and nobody worried about, I knew I was going to be retiring, but nobody worried about it. He just retired and they carry on. And that wasn't the case. And that's why I brought you in, and you've changed all our thinking radically in many, many ways. So it wasn't wasted, but I learned a lot too, by the way. And this is part of the learning, was the legacy versus lifestyle. I had this laboratory.
Well, we do learn from all the clients, however they are. But I think the other piece of this is it's being intentional, not only about your decisions, but about your willingness to change. Because I think,
Mhm.
over the past 100 years, the idea that a business will just stay the same for 30, 40 years is just, that's gone.
Well,
And
I think that's going back to what we were saying a little bit earlier. I completely agree, and I think that's why uh, the training and all that stuff we were talking about earlier has gone by the board, because it shouldn't have done. But the excuse is our business is changing so rapidly
mhm,
on such a shorter scale than we've
yeah,
ever seen before. That the training is almost out of date tomorrow. I don't agree with that, by the way, but
yeah.
that's an opinion that's held. Yeah,
And probably planning, long planning is considered, well, things are going to change, so why would I spend any time thinking about,
yeah,
5 years from now, or what I want to do? But what it comes, and that reinforces the, sort of challenge of taking the time to do this work, is because things are changing and we're so busy just responding and reacting. But we're
well,
not
yeah,
we're not
well,
creating the change. We're not being intentional. We're just reacting.
yeah, and um, I think it was Patton who said, you as soon as um, General Patton, as soon as the enemy's engaged, any plan you had goes out the window, right?
Mhm,
So,
mhm.
but that's not an excuse. What he should have added to that was, because that sounded really clever, was we had a plan B and a plan C, and they knew how to react to certain situations.
Yeah,
He should have said that as well, because I agree. No
yeah,
plan is chaos, right?
yeah. Well, two eminent also philosophers on the same topic, Churchill said, um, "Planning is vital. Plans are worthless." But
Mm.
the effort to do the planning
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
prepared for stuff. And then there's Mike Tyson, who said, no plan survives a punch in the nose. So there you have three versions of the same thing. You can decide.
That's
I
true.
think it's true,
That is true. They're all saying the same thing. You're
because for
absolutely.
a while, I
But
think
in,
the
but
80s,
if you take that further on, Ron, then the boxer doesn't bother training, right?
yeah. Well, that's a great analogy because, well, I don't know what's going to happen, so I'm not going to prepare for anything.
Exactly.
And then, yeah, what does finish look like? You face down on the canvas. That's what
Yeah.
it looks like. But I think, the other part of that is that, we've got um, all these forces that are kind of making it difficult to do what we're proposing, which is to take the time to really be intentional and think about this. And I think, in some ways, I mean, especially during the 80s, there was kind of this over planning
Mm,
where people spent hours in meetings going over every possible thing.
yeah.
And
Yeah. It's
by
true.
the time the meeting was over, whatever they were talking about was probably had changed,
Yeah.
certainly now. So now we've kind of swung the other way where it's just, let's
Yeah.
just react.
You do your 10-year plan if you do one at all on the back of an envelope, whereas we used to have like 3,000 slides for
Yeah.
every possible. I'm talking about the Coca-Cola company. When we presented a division plan to the division president, there would be a staff of people with backup slides in case he asked a question that we hadn't got for the overhead that we got on the screen. I'm serious. I'd be like, oh, could you pull out the one we had that on the, if the weather changes from rainy to sunny tomorrow, pull that slide out, will you? This is what the effect it will have on
But
sales.
but see,
Well,
I think that's it. And probably a lot of those never got used. But the planning of the planning
very,
was, you
yeah,
had to think about all the different things. And I think that's valuable.
I
Uh,
do too. The only
but if
trouble
you
is
get
we
locked
spent,
into the plan, then it's,
the only trouble is, and I agree with what you've just said, but 3 months of the year was spent putting together the business plan, right?
yeah, I know. I talked with a guy who worked at 3M, and he said about 6 months before the end of the year, they would want everybody to turn in their um, projected budget for the next year, their sales targets, their overhead, everything. And then about a month later, that would come back and say, no, we don't know. We're not happy with that. And that was about the feedback they got. So they had to do it again. And that took 6 months to finally come up with what probably somebody in the senior level had a number in mind.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, I just always wanted them to just tell me what you want to put in there. And then we'll work toward that. But this 6 months of trying to guess what's a good number, is just.
We used to do a bit of both. We used to have a top-down number. They said, hey, this is what we think we're going to hit based on so you'd have some smart strategic planning guy doing that. And then we bottom up, which would be, this is what we think we can reach. And then you get to those come to Jesus meetings where you actually agree on a figure.
Yeah.
But
well, and then you
a bit of both.
You have to add in the part that says, well, if we ask for this much budget, then we might get this.
Yeah.
So we're going to go high. And the other one is, well, we could probably reach this goal, but we don't want to promise that.
Yeah.
So that's short. And so there was all this machination. And in the end, I'm not sure it made that much difference, except perhaps to bonuses.
Yeah. The
incentives.
Yeah, I mean, we'd always go low because we knew senior management wanted to leverage us higher so we could compromise, right?
Yeah. It's kind of like I was just looking at the news on the union, auto workers union strike and the things, their demands. And some of them, the 4-hour or the 4-day work week, I think they have a whole bunch of stuff in there that's stalking horses. It's like, we'll ask for this, but we would settle for something else, because some of it just seems wildly optimistic. And on the company side, they're saying absolutely that we can't do anything near that. I think they're so they're both kind of at these strong positions, and as all negotiations, hopefully they will move, and the union will explain why they settled for less, and the company will explain why they suddenly were able to do more.
Yeah.
And just a question of how long it takes. Meanwhile, I think the non-U.S., non-domestic car makers are thrilled. They couldn't be happier
certainly.
that the big three are on strike, because it's like, oh, gee, you want a Ford pickup? Well, take a look at this Honda. I think you'll be very happy with that, and you can get one.
The market will provide.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I mean, talk about shoot yourself in the foot. We just got over the chip shortage, right? And showrooms are stocked again, and then they go and do this.
Well, and whatever happened to the toilet paper shortage? My God, that 3 years ago, that was first. That was topic that led the news.
Completely self-inflicted, right?
Absolutely self-inflicted.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Conversation Street. For more information or to schedule a private conversation with Success Authorities, email us at inquire@successauthorities.com.